Well, we're back again, ladies and gents. Welcome to the second part of Dragoneer's deplorable degenerative doings. Pad and pen. If you haven't seen the previous part where I covered a few of his controversies, I would recommend giving that a watch beforehand, but here's a quick recap of what we're dealing with. So, this is Sean Peach, aka Dragoneer, Inflation Digimon Furry Extraordinaire. In the previous video, we talked about how Dragoneer was the leader of a site called FurAffinity, a site where he badmouthed other furries with sock puppet accounts named after other deceased furries, as well as hire a hacker he was friends and neighbors with who would stab him in the back while he defended their actions. For this video, we'll be getting right back into the pile here by speaking about another one of Dragoneer's friends. One whose past involves a lot more heinous things than just hacking a game mod. Meet Growly, or Almighty Tora. His qualities include being a friend of Dragoneer's, on top of being a registered sex offender by the name of Daniel Llamas, who had been convicted of sexually violating a 14-year-old boy in 2001. You see, in 2009, a user on FurAffinity was using the site to spread awareness of what Daniel had done. As he caught wind of this, he will run over to Dragoneer in hopes that he would deal with the troll. However, during their conversation, Dragoneer would find out that Daniel had been using the site for horrific purposes, going to underage FurAffinity users and soliciting nudes from them. Now, this is something that should enrage and anger someone. Imagine a friend of yours was using your home to appeal and indulge in their disgusting paraphilia of getting off to young children. Some people out there, if they found that out, would probably be getting arrested themselves, covered in blood that wasn't theirs. Dragoneer, on the other hand, felt sad that now he'd have to ban a friend from his site. He was torn that he would have to remove a convicted pedophile from FurAffinity, let alone report what he was doing on site to the authorities. And while no sign of Dragoneer reporting Daniel to the authorities can be found, it wouldn't be wrong to assume that he didn't, because what was public was Dragoneer tweeting. One of the hardest things you can do as an admin is ban a friend. A good friend. Tonight I had to, and I hate myself for it. Just forget the fact that a known pedophile was using his site to get nudes from children after being convicted for actually raping one. Dragoneer's sad, guys. Can we get an F in chat for Dragoneer? Now, there is a lot more on this Tora guy that would probably make for a pretty interesting read, but that's for another time. For now, we're continuing with Dragoneer's list of atrocities. From Dragoneer's actions, one could rather easily assume that he clearly doesn't have a problem with people sexually violating animals. This can be noticed on multiple occasions, where he's gone out of his way to defend zoophiles, refusing to ban them, as well as protecting them from being ridiculed. I mean, hell, one was even lucky enough to make it onto the staff team. Chase V Rocket, an admitted sexual dog abuser who posted images of dog genitalia on his FurAffinity gallery. He would also often have discussions surrounding his interest in screwing animals, and yet to this day, he's still a member of the staff team. He's just on a different account though. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want to check the gallery of a staff member to see a real red rocket, right? The same gallery with a post saying that he lost his virginity at age 12, only to say he likes fursuit, animal, and cub porn. In the exact same post showing a dong from each subject he mentioned. I cry a lot, you and me both, dog screwer. Also, on a small note, he was having a conversation with a guy named Camo. What makes him so special? Probably the fact that he used to be the owner of an adult toy company, Bad Dragon. But I don't know why I would mention that. It's almost like I'm hinting at something here. Now, as consistent as Dragoneer's been defending people who've done a full spectrum of deplorable crap, one thing of his that isn't very consistent is what he allows on FurAffinity. The rules are essentially whatever he feels they should be on any given day. On one day, you might be allowed to share a video of you and your significant other recreating meat spin in fursuits, but God forbid you talk about your relatively harmless sex life on daytime television. Because that would bring us to two controversies involving FurAffinity's position on off-site behavior. The first one involves another furry by the name of Chewfox. Some might recall this situation, but for those who don't, namely myself, Chewfox is a furry who was involved in a segment of the Tyra Banks show. This segment involved 3 consenting couples who talked about their deviant sex lives. One woman was sleeping with 2 different husbands, another couple attended swinger groups, and Chewfox and her husband fornicated in mersuits.
Okay, so tell me about what a furry does.
Well, we are furries. Furries are people who have an inner animal that they like to celebrate.
Okay.
And we celebrate it through drawing ourselves and wearing costumes and other such things.
So it's like costumes like at the amusement park? Yeah, it is. Oh my gosh. So
it
it's
is quite similar, yes.
so it's
that
like
would be my
mascot,
costume.
like you go to a football game.
We like to go out to different places and wear it. There are events that you go to with other furries, and they have dances in their costumes.
Okay, when you go to Disneyland, do you guys get turned on? No? You're not looking at Mickey Mouse going, hi, going, ooh, yeah.
Just your usual daytime television, you know? I don't know who tuned in to see this, but more power to them. Needless to say, a good chunk of the community was pretty irritated by this, Dragoneer included. So with Dragoneer not being happy on that day, he would ban Chewfox from FurAffinity, despite not breaking a single rule on site or any laws off-site. Well, the laws of decency maybe, but that's more of a personal view. Dragoneer would give a statement on this ban, saying that Chewfox talking about fursuit sex on television was worse than being a pedophile. He went on about how she sold out the fandom for her own personal gain. She got her 15 minutes of fame on national TV by showing herself to be the very kind of person we all like to pretend doesn't exist. And she did it by taking a collective shit on the rest of us for a few dollars and her moment in the limelight. I was less embarrassed over the Alan Panda pedophile issue than I am this shit. A woman talking about her consenting sexual relationship on daytime television got under his skin more than a daddy fur caretaker with a cub side trying to arrange a sexual encounter with a 15-year-old boy over the internet. There truly is nothing sadder than that. Although Dragoneer would backtrack and lift this ban, she would be banned in the following year for allegedly walking past Dragoneer with a shirt that said, "I crashed FurAffinity twice, and all I got was this stupid shirt." Oh, okay, I'm probably gonna regret that last part, but fuck it, we'll keep it in. So that would be two events where Chewfox have been banned for their behavior outside of FurAffinity. Both examples that were, for the most part, pretty harmless to others. So you would think that any large-scale deplorable behavior off-site could get you banned from FurAffinity, right? Well, Terrangriff's issue would go on to disprove that. You see, Terrangriff was another user on FurAffinity. Only instead of going on TV talking about mersuits, she had the unfortunate experience of falling victim to a stalker, Frederick Sam. He would post her personal information onto multiple sites, FurAffinity being one of them. Easily the most horrifying action this user took was a not safe for work story he wrote about her. The story consisted of the main character, presumably a self-insert, breaking into Taryn's house, stealing her fursuit, and sexually violating her. What makes it even more abhorrent is the fact that he used her real name and address in the story, making several comments about looking up Taryn's address and how easy it was to find where she lives. This user was being genuinely harassed on and off site, so you would think a FurAffinity admin would at least do their part in keeping someone like that off of their site, right? Instead, you have Terrangriff trying to get attention from the staff only to be ignored time and time again. As you would expect with a lack of action from the staff team, she would take the issue into her own hands by writing a journal calling out her stalker and warning other users of his behavior. A journal that can no longer be found, because this is when the staff team would begin to take action against the issue. By deleting Terrangriff's callout journal, because she was supposedly harassing her stalker. Dragoneer would say how he didn't see a problem with how it was handled, saying that the stalker's actions were mostly off-site, and therefore out of his jurisdiction. He even thinks that being ignored by site staff while a stalker is harassing and doxing you isn't a good reason to leave his fucking site. He said, the admin took the right course of action in this case. I don't feel it's something to leave FA over, as if it happened on FA, it will happen on any site. There is a point there, but here's another point to think about. If this were to happen on a site that takes blatant harassment seriously, maybe Dragoneer wouldn't have had to waste his precious time saying that he couldn't be bothered to at least try to care about the safety of his site members. And with these two different occasions, I'm sure you can get a clear idea of why there would be no harm in replacing the site's terms of service with a picture of a pancake, except for the fact that even that would be rather sloppily put through. Now, I talked briefly about this in a previous video, but here I can give a bit more of an idea of what went on during this whole thing. In December of 2013, Dragoneer announced that a team of volunteer programmers would begin work on the 4th attempt at rewriting the site. This attempt named Project Phoenix. Now, the leader of the team was notable cub and furry infidelity artist Zosh, and during this time, Zosh also had the pleasure of being an accused sexual violator. In 2010, there were private messages leaked showing one of Zosh's ex-partners, FurAffinity's, coming to Dragoneer making claims that Zosh emotionally manipulated and intimidated her into having sex with him. Dragoneer's response was telling her to keep quiet about it. He clearly saw no problem bringing Zosh onto the project, regardless of how horrible it would be for his already abhorrent PR. Just like Nuke, an uproar of the upset will plague the comments of the announcement, multiple arguments breaking out between those who disliked and liked the cub artist. Dragoneer said that he was neutral on the issue of whether or not Zosh actually sexually violated her, just before saying on Twitter that Zosh couldn't have because she willingly drove to his house. But back to the rewrite. Things were going... well, things weren't. It turned out that 2 months earlier, Dragoneer was approached by a user by the name of Meyer, who asked if he could work on rewriting FurAffinity's code. Dragoneer would approve it, and Meyer would go about organizing a small team to start working on the project. But because Dragoneer forgot to communicate with Meyer, he forgot he had given someone permission to redo the entirety of his site. Though even with the confusion, Meyer's team would agree to meet with the Project Phoenix group to collaborate on rebuilding the site. However, Zosh turned out to be so unbearable that Meyer and Ben would abandon the group within the first 24 hours. This ranged from Zosh insulting Meyer's money management to wanting to redo the site in JavaScript, which would have resulted in chugging out everything already done in Python and PHP. It also became obvious that Zosh had been lying about his qualifications. He belittled Ben and Meyer, saying he had been a PHP pro for 12 years. At the time, he was only 30. He even asked questions in a patronizing manner, only to reply with incorrect answers. There's also just this tweet. I don't really know what it can mean though. So when it was time for the rewrite to crash and burn like the others, instead of admitting that he hired an unprofessional, underqualified person, he instead tried to push the blame onto Meyer and Ben. Not the brightest way for the Phoenix to burn, but I suppose the 5th time was the charm later down the line, or whatever number rewrite it took to do this, I don't know. Now we move down to January of 2015, where FurAffinity would be bought out by the company Imvu, most well known for its freemium chat app. Although this wouldn't be announced until March, as Dragoneer saw it fit not to tell anyone until 2 months after it happened. Dragoneer insisted that this was a good thing because the two communities had so much in common, which struck as a tad bit odd, because furries hated Imvu for being a cheaply done version of Second Life, and the users of Imvu hated furries, well, for being furries. Whatever that may entail. That was so corny. So, safe to say it wasn't taken all too well by the community. Though, it would only get worse when users learned that Imvu would have the rights to use their artwork in their advertisings. As well as Dragoneer flat out admitting that he still needed to clarify what Imvu had meant by that months after he agreed to the terms. Also, unrelated, but there was also a comment on this from Sangi. You know, snake thing accomplice Sangi. Just found it a bit weirdly funny, you know? Anyway, these secret buyouts weren't the only shady dealings going on with the site. Going into October, Dragoneer was running a fundraising campaign to help with DDoS protection, which was a bit ironic, seeing as that 3 days after the GoFundMe was set up, FurAffinity and other furry websites were hit with large-scale DDoS attacks. Once these attacks had ended, donations came to him in boatloads, raising nearly $20,000 before it was closed. After deductions, Dragoneer had a pool of $10,002 to spend on improving his site. Although, between November and December, he had only spent $391 of that $10,000. But on top of these donations, along came Imvu, who was more than happy to toss $20,000 worth of hardware at the guy. Around the same time donation spending updates came to a halt. So that raised a question. Where's the money, Lebowski? What happened to the $9,611? I mean, Dragoneer said it went towards servers, regardless of the one that was just collecting dust, as well as services like Cloudflare, even though before selling the site it cost him less than $500. The most reasonable explanation at the time was that the donations went to pay the $10,000 the site owed in taxes. Although as reasonable as it sounded, it wasn't as logical as the explanation of it going towards the house Dragoneer and Squiggles moved into. This holding a bit more weight because the two complained about how it was living in apartments with their friends as late as March 2014, and the two moved into a house around October 2014. Squiggles even later made posts that suggested that Dragoneer had taken the DDoS fundraiser money for himself. And since we've mentioned Squiggles, let's end this off with a little bit about the dynamic of these two. In early 2016, Dragoneer's wife had begun posting a rather large amount of gift art featuring her and a new friend, a brony with the user handle FireEnvy. Envy was the department head for exhibitor relations for BronyCon, a convention that Squiggles frequented to sell her artwork. There was even a time where BronyCon cut down on vendor tables, most vendors struggling even to get one. Squiggles, on the other hand, somehow managed to get 2 tables for her perler beads and a few other trinkets. She would also begin to call Envy her squish on FurAffinity, lowering Dragoneer, her husband, to essentially second place, later lowering him even further into the friend zone. After the months of rumors this bio-hierarchy made, Dragoneer would post a journal officially announcing that he and Squiggles had separated. Squiggles leaving a comment saying that she felt it should have stayed private. Other users gave their 2 cents on the situation, some saying that Squiggles had been getting with Envy for months, even before she and Dragoneer's official split. Many had the belief that she only hooked up with Dragoneer due to his e-fame, a possible craving for power and status that came with dating such a big figure of the fandom, both figurative and literal. And now that the site was owned by Imvu, and the fact that Dragoneer could have been kicked off from his position at any given moment, she may have found it fit to jump ship, hauling ass to the life preserver of another person who would grant her the popularity she craved. Of course, this is all just a very elaborate what if. Although, you know what wasn't a what if? The fact that it was actually worse, because not only was Dragoneer being cucked in his own site, he was being cucked in his own home. After the divorce, he allowed Squiggles and Envy to continue living in the house that Dragoneer's parents technically owned because of the mortgage being in their name. The rumor is that Squiggles and Dragoneer were hiding their divorce from them so they could keep living there. She would eventually get kicked out when Dragoneer's parents decided to sell the place. And in 2017, she found herself $20,000 in debt because Dragoneer, instead of paying cash for house repairs like he said he would, put the repairs in Squiggles' name. And there lies what I was able to manage of Dragoneer's past atrocities. Currently, Dragoneer seems to be dealing with Imvu moving on from FurAffinity, the company deciding to sell and Dragoneer spending the money to buy it before anyone else could. I mean, it makes sense, I suppose. I can only imagine if someone else was able to buy it before he did, Dragoneer would have been the first to get the boot. I haven't even touched his crimes against humanity, I mean his fetish art, but for the sake of not scarring you along with myself, I'll just describe it here. His fetish art ranged from crush to cub, multiple subcategories of vor, inflation via gas station pump, and what can only be described as screwing your girlfriend until she melts, and then eating what remained of her. That's what this guy gets off to, if that's what you were wondering. There was supposed to be a joke here about Reptile and Melina fanfiction, but I'm an idiot. So what I will say here instead is to like the video if you did, comment your thoughts on this mountain of moronic mistakes, and I will see you in the next video. Stay safe out there.